trembling. Huh. He may be huge, but his body is fragile.
Romeo Is a Dead Man can be pretty brutal. After all, the game calls itself ultra-violent science fiction, but the violence isn't exclusively directed at the hordes of rotters and space-time criminals that Romeo and company are fighting. Instead, Romeo himself gets pretty beat up, and if you're not careful, you can find yourself retrying encounters and boss fights over and over again. If you are looking for some help taking down the universe's biggest threats to space and time, don't worry, we've got you covered. Here are 6 combat tips for Romeo Is a Dead Man. There are 4 melee weapons and 4 ranged weapons that you can have in your arsenal. However, they aren't all unlocked right at the start. That said, you can unlock them pretty quickly once you have access to the entirety of the last night by spending Emerald Flowsion in the Dead Ball unlocker, and you should make it a priority to unlock them as soon as you can, so you have access to every combat option available to you. You won't have enough Emerald Flowsion to get them all right away, but you'll get the resource pretty quickly once you start the first proper mission in the shopping mall. Once you get all the weapons, not only will you find your own personal go-to melee/ranged weapon combo, mine's the Arcadia melee weapon with the Diaspora shotgun, but you'll also learn that each weapon has its own place in combat, meaning you can make certain enemy encounters significantly easier by switching things up. I spent a lot of time in the first mission trying to put a square peg in a round hole, so to speak, with the combat, but once I started unlocking new weapons, things started clicking into place and I was able to start dealing with special rotters much easier. Bloody Summer is Romeo's special move that charges up as you deal damage to enemies. It's super useful since it dishes out a lot of damage at once, but perhaps more importantly, it also heals you when you use it. Bloody Summer charges up pretty quickly with its base stats and incredibly fast if you improve it, more on that later. So you should be popping it off as often as you can. You'll need to be more strategic about using it during longer, more intense encounters with bosses, since there aren't always a ton of opportunities to fill the meter off the standard rotters that fill every arena, but I found it to be a really useful tool to top off my health without using a Regenetizer since they're so limited between save stations, especially at the start of the game. It's also important to recognize that each weapon has its own Bloody Summer attack associated with it that can be used in different situations to your advantage. For example, the geckos can be tough to kill since they're low to the ground and can quickly get out of your way. You can use your ranged attacks to deal with them, but since combat encounters are usually packed to the brim with enemies, getting a clear shot off can be tricky. Instead, I found that geckos are easily taken care of by switching to the Star Destroyer weapon and using its Bloody Summer attack, since it does a powerful downward slam, which is usually enough to take out a gecko in a single hit. There's one more way to use Bloody Summer to get the upper hand by taking advantage of the stylized animation that plays when you activate it. I've been playing Romeo Is a Dead Man on the more challenging orange chocolate difficulty, and there are certain combat encounters where I get completely rushed by enemies, and I can't really see what's going on. When you use Bloody Summer, the entire screen changes color, leaving Romeo and any enemies on screen as the only things you can see. In those moments when you're getting rushed, you can use Bloody Summer to slow things down a little bit and plan your next move based on what kind of enemies are where. These stylized visuals help clear some of the on-screen noise and give a bit of clarity. Romeo Is a Dead Man gives you a lot of combat options to face the overwhelming number of enemies it throws your way. One of the most important tools at your fingertips are the bastards that you can summon to fight alongside you. Each bastard is raised on the last night to do one specific combat task, be it dishing out some damage, slowing enemies down, healing you, or any number of other things. It's a good idea to spend some time fusing bastards together with Luna to give them more powerful abilities that can help you dominate in combat, since they're especially helpful in boss fights. As useful as bastards are, you're given a handful of options on how to upgrade the bastard growing process, which I found to be largely not worth it. You can upgrade the number of plant spots in the garden and speed up the time it takes for bastards to grow after they've been planted, but both of those things cost Emerald Flowsion, and to me, that resource is better spent elsewhere, like in the Deadgear Cannon Ball, more on that later. It's not a bad idea to upgrade the size of the garden once if you want to be growing a lot of bastards, but bastards grow pretty quickly as you do other tasks, so I don't think it's worth it to spend the Flowsion. There are a few different upgrade menus aboard the last night in the engineering bay that you have access to. They're all important to visit and spend the various upgrade currencies on to improve your weapons, but the place you should be visiting the most often is the Deadgear Cannon Ball arcade machine. This machine is how you upgrade Romeo's stats across the board. The game is essentially a maze that you navigate by spending Emerald Flowsion to move and pick up different power-ups scattered across the maze. You can improve things like your general attack damage, your HP, and your reload speed, but the most important power-ups to grab are the ones that increase your Regenetizer carry limit and your blood charge capacity. You can't carry many Regenetizers at the start of the game, which means you need to lean heavily on the healing effects of Bloody Summer, so by getting the carry limit upgrade, you'll be able to heal more often. Increasing your blood charge capacity is also essential since it means you can perform Bloody Summer more often, which, as we've talked about previously, is an essential combat tool. There were a few times in my Orange Chocolate playthrough where I hit difficulty walls, but visiting the Deadgear Cannon Ball to upgrade my stats was often the solution I needed to get over the hump. As you explore the Fragment Universe in search of singularities, you'll also encounter optional Palace Athenes of various difficulties. These are optional combat dungeons that you can fight your way through in between main missions. While there isn't any new story content tied to the dungeons, I'd strongly suggest that you complete them since they net you great rewards. At the end of each palace, you'll be given a wearable badge that enhances your abilities in various ways. As you work your way through the story, you'll be given more badge slots, allowing you to create some builds that increase your lethality in combat significantly. The other reason to prioritize Palace Athenes is because you'll walk away from each dungeon with plenty of new Emerald Flowsion to spend on upgrading your abilities at the Deadgear Cannon Ball or in the Bastard Garden, if that's something you choose to put your points into. It's never fun to have to grind experience in games like these, and while the dungeons might seem a little grindy at face value, I think the rewards you get out of them and the practice you get taking on intense groups of Rotters makes it worth it. It's always a good idea to prioritize taking out special Rotters as quickly as you can, since they can deal massive damage to you and augment the normal Rotters running around combat arenas. To kill special Rotters easily, you'll want to target their glowing weak spots. However, it's important to choose the right ranged weapon for each job. For example, with how fast and erratic the tomato heads move, I found that using the Nebuchadnezzar machine gun was able to hit their weak spots most consistently, or when facing the Psycho Rotters who charge you by quickly closing the distance with their jump kicks, the Diaspora shotgun was great for blasting through the weak spots on their chests. It's important to note that the Yggdrasil rocket launcher will take down almost every special Rotter with a single direct hit, but given how long it takes to reload, that's best reserved for taking out a special Rotter that you can't get a good angle on during hectic fights. So those are 6 combat tips to help you get started taking down the most powerful enemies and dangerous encounters in the game. For more on Romeo Is a Dead Man and everything else, make sure to stick with IGN.